is right to have to have made this a forgery. An artist would have had to have not only known the 4 different stories of the Bible, but to have had to have been an anatomical genius. And I mean, I've written, George may remember, I did a pop-up book on Leonardo da Vinci, going back almost 15 years ago.
That's a long time ago, yeah.
And Leonardo da Vinci, who is often considered to be one of the people who may have forged the shroud, while Leonardo's works were probably the most brilliant anatomically of the medieval period, I've never seen any Leonardo drawings which capture nearly the detail or the vivid nature of the photographs you see that Barrie has.
Well, never mind the fact that Leonardo wasn't even born, and the shroud was already documented 100 years into the historic record. So.
Right,
okay,
exactly.
Jerry, let's take this posture for a moment. Okay, let's assume it's real, which means we had this incredible human being who possessed these incredible powers of resurrection. He had the ability to do this, or somebody did for him. Who do you think he was historically? Who was he?
Well, George, this is why my novel is The Shroud Codex, because I think the novel is trying to probe into the mystery that's the shroud. If the shroud is authentic, which I believe it is, it's a record of the crucifixion and of the resurrection. And that is a dimension that we're only beginning to understand right now with modern particle physics of multiple dimensions, that we don't live in a universe that is defined by the 4 dimensions we think we live in. So even comprehending how the shroud may have been created, once you get past the fact that there's no evidence that this was a forgery, no one's ever demonstrated how it was forged, then you've got to go into paranormal understandings to comprehend how the image may have been created. That's what fascinated me in the decades that I've studied the shroud. I'm sure it's the same for Barrie.
True, although, as I said earlier in the program, I am bound because of my position as a member of that scientific team, and because I have less of that emotional attachment that perhaps some of the other researchers might have, is to sort of stay within the realm. And trust me, it is a huge, difficult situation to try and stay within the realm of science when you're dealing with this object, because there are so many beliefs that people have based on the Gospels and on their religious beliefs. And, everybody has a right to believe what they believe, but from a scientific point of view, we have to stay sort of within the observable universe. And remember, we observed, studied, and photographed and tested this cloth with every non-destructive test that was available circa 1978. And so there is a wealth of data in the scientific literature that does led me ultimately to accept that this was authentic. Now, my belief that the shroud is authentic is not a religious statement.
No,
and
it's a scientific, historical statement.
Yeah, from a historic and scientific point of view, I accept its authenticity. As for Jesus being resurrected or being the Messiah, and the only honest answer I can give is that I don't know. I mean, I don't know that. And as a Jew, of course, the Jews don't accept the Jesus. Well, some Jews do. The Messianic Jews do. I'm not Messianic Jew, and I have some people out there constantly praying for my salvation, and I appreciate that. I appreciate their consideration.
Well, would you assume this though, Barrie? If the shroud's real, which you believe it is, then that means that something dramatic happened with this individual.
I wouldn't argue that point, George. I agree that there was something certainly unique about this event that created this image, because it really defies every effort to sort of characterize it in a manner that is understood by modern science.
And George, to write the novel, what I was able to get into was the particle physics, the string theory, the multidimensional theories that could explain how this was like an event horizon, that the body, as it were, transfigured and created the image on the shroud. So as a novelist, I was able to explore those far reaches of science to explain how I see the shroud as having been created, and I had the liberty to kind of explore those areas without having to be as defined as I would have had to be if I was writing one of my typical books of nonfiction.
Okay, Jerry, we're going to be talking with you time and time again. So I wanted to thank you for bringing your perspective into this, okay? Jerry,
it's a great
Corsi.
honor to join you gentlemen tonight, and I've got to say it's great. I have great respect for Barrie and his photographs. It's been an honor to be able to use Barrie's photographs in my novel, The Shroud Codex.
Super. And we'll be back in a moment as we continue our discussion with Barrie Schwortz, Turin Shroud. We're going to get into the 1988 radiocarbon dating, get his views on that. That determined that the Shroud was made in the medieval period between 2060 and 1390. However, it wasn't the end of the matter, was it? We'll be back. If you go to the coasttocoastam.com website, take a look at our feature story, the UFO from Chile, the video footage. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Barrie Schwortz about the Turin Shroud. Next hour, we'll take your phone calls with him on Coast to Coast AM. Give us a little chronology, Barrie, if you would, of the Shroud in terms of what happened to it, who had it, who then had it, where it was, how the Vatican ended up with it. From the moment, apparently, it was taken out of the tomb. What happened?
Well, first of all, George, the first few hundred years of the Shroud are completely obscure. There's no direct mention of a shroud with an image in the Gospel, although there are many biblical scholars who have determined what they call clues or spy clues within the Gospels that indicate they saw something. I always point out to people that remembering that we're talking about a first-century Jewish burial, this cloth had blood stains on it. Blood-stained cloths are supposed to go in the grave with the body. So assuming for a moment the tomb is open, they go in, the body is gone, and they see the cloth, they're not supposed to even have it, possess it, even touch it. And yet this belonged to the man they believed to be the prophesied Messiah. So they were going to have to secret it away and not talk about it and keep it a secret. The first depiction of Jesus looking like the man on the shroud doesn't come along till about 285 A.D. in one of the catacombs in Rome. So there's this first gap in the history of the shroud that, of course, gives us, the skeptics, lots of ammunition against its authenticity. There was a cloth in Constantinople called the mandilion, which in Greek, by the way, means not made by human hands. And that cloth was reported to have a depiction of Jesus on it and was purported to be the burial shroud of Jesus. Sadly, that cloth, when the Crusaders sacked the city of Constantinople, it disappeared, never to be seen again. In about the mid-1300s, a French crusader by the name of Geoffrey de Charnay, the great-great-great-great-grandson of another French crusader named Geoffrey de Charnay, shows up with it in his possession. His great-great-great-great-grandfather had participated in the sacking of Constantinople. So you can't really make a direct connect there, and any courtroom would say, well, there's a break in the chain of custody. But it's somehow ironic that another Geoffrey de Charnay shows up with the Shroud of Turin when his distant relative had been a participant in sacking the city where this other cloth had been purported to have been kept. Supposedly it had been walled up in the wall to protect it from the Crusaders, but it disappeared, never to be seen again. Once we get to 1350, the historic record is reasonably well documented from that point until today. It became a part of a dowry that wound up in the hands of the Savoy family. The Dukes of Savoy were the monarchy of Italy. They brought it to Turin in 1578, and it never left.
It was involved in a fire, too, wasn't it?
It's been involved in several fires. In 1532, when it was still in France, there was a fire in the town of Chambéry where it was kept in the church there, and it was damaged with very distinctive burn marks happening the way it was folded that occurred down either side of the image, pretty much leaving the image intact except at the shoulders where the burns actually did some damage to the image area. Those 2 years later were patched by the Poor Clare nuns, and they also sewed a backing cloth onto the shroud to strengthen it from the weakened condition because of the fire. Those burn marks are not the only burn marks on the shroud. There's another set of burn marks on the shroud that predate that 1532 fire, because we have an artist rendition of the shroud in 1516, and he included what we call the L-shaped burn holes. There's a set of 4 of those that are on the shroud.